All right, this is MS Office Hours, and today is March 5th, 2020. Today we're going to talk about remote learning with Microsoft Teams, and to help you out with that today, we have Mr. Nick Smith from the Teams product group here to help us with what's the new content Microsoft's come out with and the guidance that we have around remote learning. Take it away, Nick.
That was a great radio voice.
That's what I'm here for, sir.
I just want to give you guys a couple of a tour of some of the quick updates that we've had over the course of the last 48 hours. Certainly right now, there are lots of people who are concerned about how Teams can be used from a remote learning perspective. And we've very quickly been trying to make sure that we can get some guidance, some documentation, some training out for people who need to use this very quickly. The first thing that I want to call out is that we have published a blog out on Microsoft Education on how schools can ramp very quickly for remote learning using Microsoft Teams. Garrett, if you wouldn't mind providing some of these links in the chat for me. This blog is available at aka.ms/Teams EDU remote blog. In this, what we have is obviously some things that are top of mind for everyone else, but also a number of assets that we are publishing to help people with this. I do want to call out that many of these assets and many of the guidance that you see will be living, breathing, updated documents. We've been providing updates to this content almost daily, and we have more planned. First of all, we understand that in this, there are multiple audiences in which we want to make sure that we address, whether it be the decision maker who's trying to find out whether or not Teams would be the right solution, whether it be someone who is a educator who is just trying to find out, hey, how can I use technology to continue my classroom instruction, or the IT admin who says, how do I get this set up and make it available for my educators to use? In this blog, there are a couple things that I want to make sure to call out. One is that we did a series of webinars this morning that are available on demand. I think we're also going to be publishing them to YouTube. These webinars, we've included them with the rest of our education webinars for people to have awareness of. But the three that we did this morning are IT admins. How can you set up Teams for your school quickly so that this can be used as a platform for remote learning? And then we also have some very specific looking at the audience that would be using this. How would you conduct online classes and lectures with your students? They go through, okay, now I have a team set up. How do I get a meeting scheduled? What are some of the tips and tricks? How can I use some of the new capabilities of Microsoft Teams, such as presenter attendee controls that allow me as a instructor to say, I'm allowed to go through and share the content, start and stop recording, but I don't want students to be able to do that. So this is a very prescriptive guidance walkthrough of all the capabilities that we have with Teams and how they can be used in these scenarios. We also have, and that's kind of in the context of a classroom and a classroom type team. We also have another webinar that is how can you just do this in an online meeting with a selected group of students. And so this is maybe a different use case depending upon who's been enabled, who hasn't. Again, very much from the perspective of how can I get this set up and use the platform as a way in which we can deliver remote instruction. I had kind of a walkthrough of these this morning for my colleague Dominic, who worked very hard over the weekend to get these set up, recorded, and published. Fantastic content. In fact, I think as he's walking it through, everyone learned something from it. So it's a great place to go and learn, even if you just want to know about some of the new capabilities that we have within Teams meetings and how they can be applied in that learning environment.
Hey, if I can jump in, I joined these today, and you would think that the IT admins one would be the one I like the most, but I'm going to encourage you guys to go watch the others. They're not very long, and I did pick up tips from him of things that I was like, oh, I forgot about that. So take the time to watch them.
Fantastic. That's a great plug. Thanks, Preston. If we can teach you something, we're doing well, right? Also here, we have a number of Microsoft Educator community trainings that have been developed in terms of how you can use this. So while we had the webinars, we are also going to have different trainings. I'm sorry, that is the webinar. We're going to have some other content that's available for teachers. I'm sorry, educators. Further down in this, you'll see that we are making A1 licenses free for educational institutions. That's always been true. We're just trying to make sure that we can make it easier for people to get this if they don't already have those licenses. But we also have published a blog on how to get started with Microsoft Teams for remote learning. This blog is on Docs. I think, as most people on this call will agree, Docs is a very technical set of content, but we do want to make sure that we are speaking to all those audiences that I talked about before. So at the very top of this document, if you are coming to learn about how teachers are going to be using this, this is where we do have some content that links out to other kind of end user facing content of how this can be used within Teams, including educator courses that are part of our Microsoft Educator ecosystem. And so something that any MIEs or teachers would already be familiar with, and it gives them the core foundation of how they can use Teams in the classroom environment. The rest of this document is basically a tour, a prescriptive guidance on if you need to get Teams set up from an infrastructure perspective, what are some of the things that you need to do? How do you do it? And kind of avoid the clutter of, okay, where are all the places I need to go and find? We try to surface that in the context of this prescriptive guidance. So first, if you need to set up user accounts, licensing, or identities, what are the articles that you need to reference? What are the steps that you need to go and take? Including where I mentioned the A1 offer, if you need support on getting additional A1 licenses, where you can go through and fill in a support ticket to get something set up for you right away. In this, we are also highlighting that Teams is supported for users who may not have email hosted within Office 365. We know that it's common that students may be hosted on G Suite or other platforms. And so we do support Microsoft in those scenarios, or Teams in those scenarios. And so we wanted to raise that as well. In the easily set up Teams, we have two very key strategic steps for IT admins in terms of how you can get this set up and provide your users the greatest amount of flexibility while still maintaining the control that you need in certain areas. The first section in this is the strategy on who should you allow to create teams. By default, anyone can create Office 365 groups or teams. The natural IT reaction to this is to turn it off and put some sort of request process. Especially in an area in which we're trying to get this up quickly, there is incredible need for educators or staff or others to be able to create their own teams without having to go through a process. Plus, you could very quickly overload your help desk in trying to triage all these requests for teams for the purposes that are needed. So we have some guidance here in terms of what we've seen to be successful in terms of creating teams. For higher education, there's lots of value in allowing all staff, educators, and students to be able to create teams. For primary, secondary schools, lots of value for staff and educators, although we do want to restrict this capability for students, especially under the age of 18, because that can be a way in which they could go and create their own teams, invite other students, have any type of unmoderated conversation. So we wanted to make sure that we called that out. If you are primary, secondary school, this is something that you would want to go through and configure to restrict it so students do not have access to create teams. Along the same line, and this is the second part of our guidance, is how we can use Teams policies to go through and configure the experience for our users. There are two things that we suggest that you turn on, such as the ability to translate messages in the messaging policy, and then also the ability for doing meeting transcription if you're doing any type of recording. Those are off by default. But we recommend you take the defaults plus these, and those are the policies that you assign to your higher education community, including staff, educators, and students. Primary, secondary schools, we do know that we want to restrict some of those capabilities for students, again, preventing them from having the unmoderated conversation between students. And so we provided some very prescriptive guidance here for things that you would want to configure in messaging, meeting, live events, calling, and team policies, right? Rather than, hey, go and review all these things. These are common configurations that we see across all of primary, secondary schools.
So if I can, I would just call it, I know a lot of you folks that are on this call have more nuanced control sets you want, things that you want to do. This is a set of guidance that says this is what we're seeing commonly, and this is a great place to start, especially if you need to get this stuff set up and rolled out in a way that is quick and relevant. But you certainly can continue to create more nuanced policies. Just wanted to make sure I call that out. Sorry.
Yep, absolutely. This is the highest level guidance of how you get up and going quickly. So these are the common things. I had mentioned it earlier on this call, but also when you have a different set of policies for students and staff and educators, because while you want to restrict this for your students, there's still an incredible amount of value for your educators to be able to schedule meetings, which you'll want to in a remote learning environment, or to have chat with other educators. This is where we will use that ability to assign policies based upon security group to make sure that we get the right policies to our educators and the right policies to our students. So we have guidance on that here, as well as the link on how you can use those tools. Once Teams has been set up and we have those right kind of controls in place, then we also want to look at how can I go through and use Teams for the purposes of a secure classroom or the kind of class meetings. There are two options here. One, we recommend the class type team because it does come with lots of capabilities, including assignments, OneNote Classroom Notebook, a read-only file for class materials, the ability to mute a disruptive student. There are two ways in which we can do this at scale. One, IT can set up a school data sync process that would allow you to go through and automatically provision teams for all of your sections, making the teacher the owner of the team and the students members of the team. So this reduces the friction for educators of, okay, how do I get my class into this? One of the big improvements that we had this semester was that if you go through and you set this up, the instructor still has to go through and activate the team before students get access. So if they decide they don't want to use Teams, then students won't have access to something that the teacher's not moderating or working in. It also gives the instructor the ability to go through and pre-set up this team before they admit students. So even if you get this set up, it doesn't necessarily mean I am saying Teams will be used for every single class we have. What we're doing is we're making it available for classes. The teachers get the decision on whether or not they want to activate the team and use it in that manner. So huge improvement that we made just a couple of months ago. If you cannot get school data sync set up in time, or there's it's still in the process, or you're looking for a less friction way, we also have recommendations here on how educators can set up their own class type teams. This, of course, is dependent upon making sure that all educators can create groups. But if they are going to create their own teams, there are a couple of strategies that they could use to get their students into the team, whether it be adding them individually, sharing a join code, or even sharing a link to the team via email that people can click on, and then the instructor can improve their access to the team. So a couple of different strategies on how we can get the environment set up and the right students in the right team. I realize I'm going pretty quick. I just want to pause in case there are any questions.
So there was a question from Adam of why is group policy assignment not in the Teams Admin Center GUI? This, among other settings, changes currently and can only be done in PowerShell.
That's a fantastic question, Adam. And that is because we have produced the guts of this ability and we wanted to get it out as quickly as possible. It's going to take a little bit longer for us to get the GUI work done. It doesn't mean we're not going to do it. It is definitely on the backlog. It's definitely something we're working on, but we'd rather expose this capability to you when you can use it now rather than waiting for the full exposure of the GUI way of configuring it available. That will be coming. It's just on a longer timeline.
And then Chris had asked, are the school data sync services from Microsoft included in our licensing, or is there any cost for or information that you have related to those, such as professional service hours?
School data sync is 100% completely free for education. In fact, even the support that is used, and I caution using the word support, they are pretty much the ones that will help you through the journey. Don't just use them for reactive support. Engage them in your planning, engage them in setting up your profiles and your configuration with your SIS. They are completely free. They can share the tips and tricks for making sure that you get this set up successfully, and some of the things that we have learned from other customers. So consider them as almost a partner or services that is free to help you along this journey.
Perfect. That's all the questions we have in the IM window. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm going to call off mute and ask real quick.
Okay, I will continue. Once we have those class teams set up, we also have a little bit of guidance here on first steps that you'd want to do. Customizing your settings, creating channels, setting up your first post. Each of these links is taking you to end user facing kind of guidance that give you information on, hey, how do you post the message, or how do you track conversations? For example, this is just a little 2-minute video that shows best practices and recommended tips and tricks. So we're trying to make sure that as we are providing the overall guidance, we are also providing you the tools that you can use for helping to drive some of the adoption or awareness of this. We are also conscious that beyond just needing to have a place in which classes can meet and have a virtual learning environment, we want to make sure that we are providing a place for staff communication, right? Principals talking with their teachers, conversations that are happening from the school district down to all the principals, different ways in which this can be used for staff collaboration, because that's going to be neat as well. And so that's where we have some guidance here in terms of how you can use staff type teams and some other capabilities that you can bring in. Again, linking to guidance in terms of how do you think about channels or other areas. If you'll give me just a second to pause, I need to replace the battery on my headset.
Yeah, so just so you guys know, if we have any other questions, we can stick around afterwards. For anybody who doesn't want to be on the recording, please hold your questions till the end. We'll stop a little bit early so you can ask those. Continue on, Nick. Sorry.
All right, thank you. You know, it's been a good day when you've had to do that 4 times.
I don't even know how you're still speaking, man.
Yes.
This is a hot topic, though. I'm sure you've been very busy all day.
It is. So those 2 sections are about how you can use Teams and the different scenarios that you can use them for different high-level needs that we see across all schools or universities. We also understand that Teams meetings are going to play a big piece into this. And so we have a couple of sections here in which how can you get started on collaborative meetings for virtual classes or even staff engagement. We very specifically chose the word collaborative because it's a meeting like this in which everyone has the opportunity to provide input, to unmute and ask questions. As we discussed on this, that does scale up to 250 users. And then we also have a number of guidance in terms of, hey, do you want to schedule this meeting within a private space or within a channel? How you can use cloud recording and have it transcribed. And then also, while many people will be using their laptop speakers and microphone, if you're looking at using another device, where are some of our Teams optimized devices for a premium experience, such as being able to swap out your battery while you're in the middle of a call. The The other scenario that we know that people will need is if you need to communicate on a broad perspective. So, hey, here's what the school's plans are in terms of what's going to happen and when, how we're going to do instruction, when we're going to return. Anytime that it'd be like a district or university event, a superintendent call with a community of principals and educators, or with parents, or a presidential or chancellor address from the university side. This is a great use of Microsoft Teams live events, because this is often a one-way communication in which you could have a very internal produced content in which you have a limited set of speakers, but you could scale out to up to 10,000 participants who are in a consuming mode. They can still ask questions through Q&A, and that Q&A can be moderated in the internal live events meeting by a moderator who can respond back to individual questions or respond back and make that available for everyone to see. But this is also a way in which you can have the broader set of people who might need to be hearing the message that is going out and be able to consume that on the web without having to download or install the Teams client. It also gives you control where you maybe don't want a random parent who is picking up their kids, unmuting, and you hear the kids getting in the car. And that's where the scenarios of having that produced event with limited speakers really pay dividends. Beyond that, we've also added some recommended tips and tricks just for people to get started, things that will really help with the culture of using Teams. If you have to get this out very quickly, there's also a number of different adoption content, including email templates, success kits, quick videos in which you can get people going, education playlist, blogs on how Teams can be used for distant, link back to the blog. And then we don't want to forget that still you're going to have people call support. And so here are some tips and tricks that, one, will help you give an idea of how Teams uses different Office 365 services that you may already be supporting, that you already have the skill to support those. You just want to understand how Teams is leveraging those in the back end. And then some other timely articles that might be needed for how you need to manage the environment, whether it be troubleshooting Teams installation or managing kind of that call quality as people are using more of the meeting capabilities of Teams. As I said, we wanted to get this out for people who needed to act on something very quickly. We are continuing to iterate, update, and improve a lot of the guidance in this, including developing additional background material to make it easier to consume some of the other documents and documentation.
Perfect. Thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time to go through this. I know this is all brand new. I literally was on a call with Nick like 2 hours before this started and said, hey, my feelings won't be hurt if you don't jump on to help us. But by the way, there's going to be a bunch of folks on who want to hear about this. So I really, truly appreciate you coming on and doing this for us, Nick. I see I've got another call here in the IM, or a question here in the IM window. So I'll ask that. And then I'd encourage anybody, if you want to come off mute, please feel free to do so. School Data Sync Tech Team has been very motivated to help us connect via API to our student information system. We're working through configuring this connection right now. I'm very pleased with the support so far. Okay, so it wasn't a question, but it was a great positive statement. So I'm glad I read that, took the time to do that for you. So yeah, let's see. And it looks like we don't have any other questions posted right now. Does anybody want to come off mute and ask any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to stop the recording here.
I think I kind of missed, in terms of contacting support for education, can you put that in the chat, or what's the direct link for getting help with setting up School Sync?
For School Data Sync, I will put it in right now.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I'm going to,
oh, go ahead.
I was just say, while you do that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. We tend to get other questions once we shut that down. So I appreciate you going through this, Nick.